says, it's about little I and big we. It's not about me, it's about mine, but us and ours. So read a little bit about that, get a little bit of what we're reading, and then move on. I hate stopping in the middle of things, and it sucks. Doodly! Doodly's here, everybody. Let me do one more thing here, and we'll get started. All right, I'm back. Let's get started. I did 3 more shares. Look at me, sharing away. All right, so let's start from a little bit back. Let me go put on my lights. I forgot. You always forget to do this. There we go. I think Rufus is in your room, by the way. Okay, it's about little I and the big we. It's not me and mine. It's us or our and ours. The violence which has ruled over the ordering of the colonial world, which has ceaselessly drummed the rhythm for the destruction of native social forms and broken up without reserve the system of reference of the economy, the customs of dress and external life. The same violence will be claimed and taken over by the native, a moment when deciding to embody history in his or her own person. He or she surges into forbidden quarters. Prior to the experience of writing these reflections, I would read that passage and focus only on one line: surges into the forbidden quarters. My focus was on the narrow forms of violence. I was wrapped up in my own riot stage, aside from not being able to understand violence from a revolutionary standpoint. I was clearly unable to grasp what it means to embody history, a subject we'll have to take up below. Here we go. The restoration of the restoration of nationhood to the people requires a revolutionary violence, a total constantation. I can't say it. Contestation. Contestation of colonial and bourgeois hegemony, by which means the people free, and the process of development of their social productive forces. They renew and reshape their social forms and the system of reference of their economy. The nation is the restoration of the ways of life and of thoughts of the people. Let's read down here. As soon as a native begins, let me make sure. Wait, this is where I was confused because I don't know which thought to do. There's another one. I think I read this one, this part.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead. I already read this. Should I read it again anyways, you think?
Yeah.
As soon as the native begins to pull on his moorings and to cause anxiety to the settler, he is handed over a well-meaning soul who in culture Congress point out to him the specificity of the wealth of Western values. But every time Western values are mentioned, they produce in the native a sort of stiffened or muscular lockjaw. During the period of decolonization, the native's reasons is appealed to. He is offered definite values. He is told frequently that decolonization need not mean regression, and that he must put his trust in qualities which are well tried, solid, and highly esteemed. But it so happens that when the native hears a speech about Western culture, he pulls out his knife, or at least he makes sure that it is within reach. The violence with which the supremacy of white values is affirmed, and the aggressiveness which has permeated the victory of these values over the ways of life and thought of the native means that, in revenge, the native laughs in mockery when Western values are mentioned in front of him. In the colonial context, the settler only ends his work by breaking in the native when the latter emits loudly and unintelligibly the supremacy of the white man's values. In the period of decolonization, the colonized mass mock that these very values, insult them and vomit them up. Let me get some water real quick. In chapter 1, Fanon talks about the need for oppressed peoples to mock and to vomit up Western, i.e., bourgeoisie/capitalist values. Do you recall that? Do you recall that line? Reread the chapter. Only now focus on the words that call for fundamental change of the entire system of social relations to change, quote, a whole social structure. Not though, quote, from the bottom up, but rather from vertical to horizontal. We read chapter 1 and get thrown off track as Fanon makes his points about the people's state of mind at the outset, when they wrongly think, for example, that changing things from the bottom up, or that merely replacing the foreigner is the objective of the struggle. Wait, make sure. Is the objective of the struggle, or that there will be and need not be a period of transition. Such thinking is corrected only after years of sacrifice and struggle. I.g., all now are seen in the light of experience to be the symptoms of a very great weakness. While the people thought that they could pass without transition from the status of a colonized person to that of a self-governed citizen of an independent nation, while they grasped at the mirage of their muscles' own intimacy, they made no real progress along the road of knowledge. Their consciousness remained rudimentary. The struggle for national liberation does not consist in spanning the gap at one stride. The objectives of the struggle ought not be chosen without discrimination, as they were in the first day of the struggle. Let's see here, it's making sure. All right, cool. Throughout chapter 1, Fanon talks about the nation, what it is, and what it ought to become. He talks about how the struggle to liberate and to develop the nation should be conducted, so that the nation becoming will have a chance to realize its full potential and avoid the pitfalls of spontaneity, narrow bourgeois nationalism, and to escape the reactionary rule of the nation's own bourgeoisie forces. In the preface to Wretched, Sartre echoes Fanon as he characterizes anti-colonial, anti-capitalist violence as man recreating himself. It is as people recreate themselves, as nations transforming themselves, that people come to feel a national soil underfoot. Their revolutionary consciousness broadens and deepens. They come to see that they are the nation, that the nation is one with their liberty. Read chapter 1 and begin to find out that the nation should be, according to Fanon, the nation should influence individuals and modify them fundamentally, transforming spectators into privileged actors in the daily drama of national life. The nation is where, quote, the interests of one will be the interests of all, and where, quote, all resources should be pooled. The violence that Fanon discusses is of a kind that introduces into each person's consciousness the ideal of common cause, of a national destiny, and of a collective history. The living expression of the nation is the moving consciousness of the whole of the people. It is the coherent enlightened action of men and women. The nation is, according to Fanon, a new unity. It is at its best, it is new revolutionary socialist unity. At its worst, if it's formed under the leadership of bourgeois forces, it becomes a new unity that rests on a narrow racial base. I don't know what to say here. This is just a whole bunch of things. This is search unity, especially in chapter 1. Okay. As the people strive to create a revolutionary unity for themselves, their efforts are opposed first by the colonialist capitalist of the oppressor nation, and then by the puppet of neo-colonialist bourgeois forces of the nation becoming. The people's unity and the people's interests stand in opposition to the interests of all exploitative forces, particularly those who have come to power in the name of a narrow nationalism and representing a race. Presenting a race is not the same as presenting revolutionary socialist interests. The people of Africa have decided in the name of the whole continent to weigh in strongly against the colonial regime. Now the nationalist bourgeoisie, who in region after region hasten to make their own fortunes and to set up a national system of exploitation, do their utmost to put obstacles in the path of these utopia. The national bourgeoisie who are quite clear as to what their objectives are, have decided to bar the way to that unity. This is why we must understand that African unity can only be achieved through an upward thrust of the people and under the leadership of the people. That is to say, in defiance of the interests of the bourgeoisie. Too bad enough of us here or on the African continent understood the full import of these words in the 1960s and 1970s. If we had, Africa could have been spared much political turmoil and economic and social devastation. And it's still hard for us to see that most of what passes as black leadership these days is actually a post-neocolonial rule of collaborationist bourgeoisie forces. Fanon understood that oppressed nations have existed as sovereign entities prior to colonial domination. And when he speaks of the struggle as one of re-establish the sovereignty of a nation, however, he also believes that sovereignty of the people was not at the end, but a means, a condition for the free operations of the social development. Once independent and foreign control, the people must widen and deepen their revolutionary consciousness and pursue the nation's development along socialist lines. While there is a relation between what is called the vitality of a nation, explain this, i.e., that people claim lack of sovereignty alone means an end of national reality. In this sovereign existence, the lack of sovereignty doesn't of itself lead to a erosion of national reality. Rather, it is the violence of colonialism that undermines national reality as colonial violence is exerted in all spheres of the people's living and the discussions of culture below. Is it discussions? Yeah. Consequently, the national reality can be reinvigorated prior to any declaration of formal independence by the people's conscious actions in all spheres of social life and in opposition to the negative external influences of colonialism. Under this decision of the phase during which spontaneity reigns,
Sure.
Fanon describes, what's up?
Under his
What's up?
discussion.
I said discussion. Thought I did. Anyways, under his discussion of the phrase during which spontaneity reigns, Fanon describes for us part of the process through which the people begins to, quote, will itself to sovereignty. This people that has not lost its birthright, that is used to
That
living
has
in
lost
a
its
narrow...
birthright.
I said birthright.
But you said it has not lost its birthright. It has lost its birthright.
Okay. These people that has lost its birthright, that is used to living in the narrow circle of feuds and rivalries, will now proceed in an atmosphere of solemnity to cleanse and purify the face of the nation as it appears in the various localities, in the variable collective ecstasy. Families which have always been traditional enemies decide to rub out old scores and to forgive and forget. There are numerous reconciliation reconciliation, long buried but unforgettable hatred are brought to light once more, so that they may more surely be rooted out. The taking on the nationhood involves a growth of awareness. The national unity is first the unity of a group, the disappearance of old quarrels, and the final liquidation of unspoken grievances. In undertaking this onward march, the people legislate, finds itself, and wills itself to sovereignty. The circle of the nation widens, and fresh ambushes to entrap the enemy hail the entry of new tribes upon the scene. Each village finds that it is itself both an absolute agent of revolution and also a link in the chain of action. Solidarity between tribes and villages, national solidarity, is the first place expressed by the increasing blow struck at the enemy. Reflecting, the faces of the nation as it appears in the various localities, that's a single face. That's a single face, not the several faces of the localities. The national identity supersedes the local identity, is not about, quote, East Coast and West Coast, North Side or South Side. It's no longer about tribes. Reflect. The taking on the nationhood involves a growth of awareness. The national unity is first the unity of a group. Awareness, so-called large nations don't fall from the sky. At its simplest, nations is the unity of two or more groups. Rather you're talking several thousands of years ago on the African or Asian continents, several hundred years ago on the European or North American continents, or in the 21st century of the Northern American continent. The settlement was begun on the very first day of the war, and it will be ended not because there is no more enemies left to kill, but quite simply because the enemy, for various reasons, will come to realize that his interest lies in ending the struggle and in recognizing the sovereignty of the colonized people. How is this so? I.e., how was the settlement begun on the first day of the war? And in what way does the enemy recognize the sovereignty of the colonized peoples? The very existence of a state of war implies the existence of a sovereign people, a people rejecting foreign incursion and undue influences, a people inserting its own supreme power over its social order. The enemy comes to acknowledge its sovereignty. The African peoples were quickly to realize that dignity and sovereignty were exact equivalents, and in fact, a free people living in dignity is a sovereign people. Rework. We're going to have to deal again with Fanon's ideas on a nation as we cover issues of culture, history, and nationalism below. However, before we discuss Fanon's view on them, state, and close out this section, I want to reflect on several other passages and subjects. The reconstruction of the nation continues within the framework and cutthroat competition between capitalism and socialism. And those bands armed with cutlasses and axes find their nationality in the implacable struggle which oppose socialism and capitalism. Although we touch on this a bit in one or two places above, it won't hurt to take another look. Based on the lines from the two paras just quoted, we can even make the point from within two contexts. Number one, as oppressed people struggle to regain national independence, their new nationality is informed by the demands of the fundamental contradictions in the world, particularly as this contradiction is manifested upon their internal national reality. The new nation can't take a third way because there is none. The new nation must choose between the capitalist way, which means continued inequalities, oppression, and exploitation at the home and abroad, or it must choose the socialist way. That is, revolutionary nationalists must make this choice. Number two, if you don't want to claim nationalism of any sort, it remains a fact that whoever and wherever you are, you must make the choice between capitalism and socialism. There is no third way for you either, nor is there any chance or likelihood of merely reforming capitalism so that it harmonizes with the vision of the truly just society that you may envision. In certain circumstances, the party political machine may remain intact, but as a result of the colonialist repression and of the spontaneous reaction of the people, the parties find themselves distanced by their militants. The violence of the masses is vigorously pitted against the military forces of the occupying power, and the situation deteriorates and comes to a head. Those leaders who are free remain, therefore, on the touchline, the sideline boundaries marking the field of play in rugby or English football editors. They have suddenly become useless with their bureaucracy and their reasonable demands, yet we see them far removed from events attempting to crowd impostures that of speaking in the name of the silent nation. As a general rule, colonialism welcomes this God send with open arms, transforms these blind mouths out into spokesmen, and into 2 minutes endows them with independence on the condition that they restore order. While mindful of this context, my reflection centered on the matter of bourgeois forces and their impostures of speaking in the name of the silent nation. If the people were silent pre or post independence, then it wasn't solely a result of the pressures of colonialism. It was also the results of the failures of the bourgeoisie nationalist forces, who never made a serious attempt to help the people find and use their own voice, to exercise their own roles as leaders of the national struggle, of the nation struggle, As Fanon closed out the first chapter, he reminds us that through their active participation in the struggle to rebuild the nation, the people have the opportunity to regain their self-respect and their sense of responsibility for the entire social order, and that even, I have to read this one. I'm going to read this. Even if the armed struggle has been symbolic and the nation is demobilized through the rapid movement of decolonization, the people have the time to see that the liberation has been the business of each and all, and that the leader has no special merit. When these people have taken violent part in the national liberation, they will allow no one to set themselves up as liberators. They show themselves to be jealous of the result of their action and take good care not to place their future, their destiny, or their fate of other countries in the hands of the living God. Yesterday, they were completely irresponsible. Today, they mean to understand everything and to make all decisions. I used the above paragraph in part 2 and referred to it as an ideal outcome at the stage of the struggle that ends with the formal establishment of the independence of the nation from foreign control. However, the ideal won't be realized if there is no genuine people's war, and if formal independence is achieved by a quick neo-colonial solution devised by colonialism and its agents inside the nation who come to head the new state. We have to keep in mind that Wretched is about what the people need to do in order to win real independence and to pursue a self-determined socialist development. Reflect now on the way Fanon closes the first chapter and on the way that he opens the second. There's a difference in rhythm between the people and the leaders of the bourgeois nationalist party, a difference of rhythm between the people and the intellectual elite engaged in trade, a difference of rhythm between the people and all of those who constitute the bourgeoisie faction of the nation, which includes feudal lords, tribal chieftains, leaders of confraternities, and traditional authorities. Reflect too. That's the title of the book, Wretched of the Earth. The book is about how the wretched can transform themselves into the enlightened and the self-governing. If you don't take anything else away with your reading of this book, you must take this. The more the people understand, the more watchful they become, and the more they come to realize that finally everything depends on them, and their salvation lies in their own cohesion, in the true understanding of their interests, and in knowing who are their enemies. Everything depends on people themselves. The salvation of the people lies in their cohesion. The people must have a true understanding of their interests. The people must know how their enemies are, eternal enemies and external enemies. This class consciousness is what is, oh my gosh, got a visual. Hold on a second. Got to appeal. Okay, come on. Consciousness is, consciousness of themselves. The masses are equal to the problems that confront them. Experience proves that the important thing is that the whole people plan and decide, even if it takes them twice or 3 times as long. The fact is that the time taken by explaining the time lost in treating the person as a human being will be caught up in the execution of the plan. People must know where they are going and why. The future remains a closed book, so long as the consciousness of the people remain imperfect, elementary, and cloudy. The awakening of the whole people will not come about all at once. The people's work in the building of a nation will not immediately take on its full dimensions. First, because the means of communication and the transmission are only beginning to be developed. Secondly, because the yardstick of time must no longer be that of the moment, but must become that of the rest of the world. And lastly, because the spirit of discouragement, which has been deeply rooted in people's minds by colonial domination, is still very near the surface. Public business ought to be the business of the public. Finish here. The need for effort to be well informed for work which is enlightened and free from the historic intellectual darkness, to hold a responsible position, is to know that in the end everything depends on the education of the masses, on the rise of the level of thoughts, and on what we are too quick to call political teaching. In fact, we often believe with criminal superficiality that to educate the masses politically is to deliver a long political harangue from time to time. Political education means opening their minds, awakening them, and allowing the birth of their intelligence. To educate the masses politically means to try to relentlessly and passionately to teach the masses that everything depends on them, that if we stagnate, it is their responsibility, and that if we go forward, it is due to them, too, that there is no such thing as a what's that word? I'm gonna look it up.
I think it's demiurge.
Demiurge. That there is no famous man who will take the responsibility for everything. But the demiurge is the people themselves, and the magic hands are finally only the hands of the people. To educate the masses politically is to make the totality of the nation a reality to each citizen. It is to make the history of the nation part of the personal experience of each of its citizens. So it takes us, we keep saying this, we are the ones that are going to have to save ourselves. We have to save ourselves by being collectively and mobilizing and being militant towards removing the state of things currently. It is up to us to change the state of things.
Yeah, there's a reason why superhero movies are so commonly made.
Mm-hmm.
It's to make us be in the mindset that someone's coming to save us.
Yep.
No one's coming to save us. We need to save ourselves.
Yep. Such PA is necessary as part of the new politics, national, revolutionary, and social. That are required as part of the process of intensifying the struggle and of preparing the people to undertake the governing of their country clearly and lucidly. How see, and then follow with all this taking stock of the situation is enlightening of consciousness, and this advance is the knowledge of the history of society, are only possible within the framework of an organization and inside the structure of a people. Such an organization is set afoot by the use of rev elements coming from the towns at the beginning of the rising, together with those rebels who go down into the country as the fight goes on. It is this core which constitutes the embryonic political organization of the rebellion. But on the other hand, the peasants, who are all the time adding to their knowledge in the light of experience, will come to show themselves capable of directing the people's struggle, the living party which ought to make possible the free exchange of ideas which have been elaborated according to the real needs of the masses of the people, helps the people to set out its demands. In underdeveloped countries, the bourgeoisie should not be allowed to find the conditions necessary for its existence and its growth. In other words, the combined effort of the masses led by a party and the intellectuals who are highly conscious and armed with revolutionary principles ought to bar the way to this useless and harmful middle class. Many intellectuals, for example, condemn this regime based on the domination of a few. There are certain members of the elite, intellectuals and civil servants, who are sincere, who feel that necessity for the planned economy, the outlawing of profiteers, and the strict prohibition of the attempts of mystification. In addition, such men fight in a certain measure for the masses' participation of the people in ordering the public affairs. There almost always exists a small number of honest intellectuals. We must know how to use these men. The party is not a tool in the hands of the government. Quite on the contrary, the party is a tool in the hands of the people. It is they who decide on the policies the government carries out. For the people, the party is not the authority, but the organism through which they, as the people, exercise their authority and express their will. See what I mean? A government is not the authority of the people are the authority of the government. See how that's reversed? That's how it should be. It is the people who must lead themselves and control all social affairs. The setting up a new state is diplomatic relations and its economic and political trends. Fanon didn't seem to doubt the need for the new nation to have a state apparatus. The only question for Fanon, in whose hands would the new state apparatus rest? In those interests would the new state apparatus operate? Would it be a people state, i.e., revolutionary, democratic, and socialist? Or would it be a neo-colonial fascist bourgeoisie state? I know some folks out there question my use of the term fascist, but this too needs re-examining, because Fanon used the term at blank, and it really means petty bourgeois ruled apparatus in form of social hegemony. Some of us, like Fanon, don't question the need for the new type of state, while others hold opposing views. Others wisely debate the issue and seek new ways to define state, moving away from the rigid doctrinaire position of both the old left and of the right. The state doesn't have to be whatever it was. It doesn't have to be whatever it is. It can be whatever the people choose it to make it. The state, according to Fanon, is an instrument that the people need to control in order to protect themselves and the goals of the revolution. Don't we all wish that everyone would, quote, just get along? But it don't work like that in the real world. The people need to protect their interests against those whose objective is not the radical overthrowing of the system, and who avoid the actual overthrowing of the present bourgeoisie state. There are those among us who claim credentials as radicals, but who want to reform capitalism and not overthrow it. At the bottom, they too still prefer the tribe, as opposed to a new type of people's democratic state and nation. There are those among us who claim to be radicals, and they use the language of radicals, but their practice shows that they don't even attempt genuine class suicide, i.e., to repudiate their own nature, insofar as it is bourgeois, and to put themselves to school with the people. It's not really a stretch of context to say that such radicals, even these days, mobilize the people with slogans of independence, and, for the rest, leave it to future events. When such parties are questioned on the economic program of the state they are clamoring for, or on the nature of the regime which they propose to install, they are incapable of replying. The bottom line being, though, that pre or post-independence, such forces refuse to follow the path of revolution. See through its eyes its mission has nothing to do with the nation. It consists, what's that say, prosaically? I'm gonna have to look up that word. Prosaically, thank you. To being the transmission line between the nation and a capitalist rampant through, though camouflage which today puts on the mask of neocolonialism. Okay, it has like 3 stars, and I'm wondering why. I'm just looking around. We have to go back to the question we raised about Wretched is really about, i.e., how to transform the wretched into the enlightened and the responsible, the self-governed. What we should be able to glean from Wretched's page are the stages of process and the general procedures to adopt by the people in the process of struggle that allows them to, 1, combat their internal and external enemies, 2, begin to build, even prior to formal independence, the apparatus institutions that will serve their interest in the creation of a new social order that guarantees to all citizens the freedom to develop as all-around human beings, freedom from exploitation and discrimination, and alienation from all forms. You should be able to glean these if that is your serious about challenging the oppressive state for the power that should be in the hands of the people. Suddenly, Fanon discussed the foreigners. In Wretched's page, he rails against colonialism as a primary external obstacle to the path of the people's liberation and development, but don't fail to notice the time he spends to detail the thought and practice of the bourgeois forces that constitute the people's primary internal enemy. Fanon notes that their thought and practice prior to the beginning of the struggle, during the struggle, and their actual and potential thought and practice after formal independence is declared, for what usually turns out to be a neo-colonial client state of imperialism. Fanon wants us to avoid having to go through that stage. Closing the road to the national bourgeoisie is certainly the means whereby the vicissitudes of newfound independence may be avoided, and with them the decline of morals, the installing of corruption within the country, economic regression, and the immediate disaster of an anti-democratic regime depending on force of intimidation, but it is also the only means towards progress. Like the new type of nation, the new type of peoples, democratic state being begins to take shape in the course of the struggle to topple the oppressive powers. Key. Remember, you're not dealing with some doctrinaire concept of corrosive, right? Power, but also with new revolutionary socialist morality. Take our stand on Fanon. The people need a new type of state. It's only a question of what kind of state it will be and in whose hands it will be. The character of the state ultimately depends on, will be determined by the character of the people with whose hands the state rests. There's no such thing as a state being inherently authoritarian. For instance, unless the people are inherently authoritarian, and there is no way to change this, the new state will be whatever the people make it, or allow others to make it. If it's truly there, and if they begin to build it now, a building that begins with the decision and dissemination of the vision and the reason why we need it, and discussion of the kind of state it ought to be and what it ought to do and not do. In the colonial situation, culture, which is doubly deprived of the support of the nation and of the state, falls away and dies. The conditions for this existence is therefore national liberation and the renaissance of the state. A nation which is born of the people, concerted actions, and which embodies the real aspirations of the people, while changing the state, cannot exist save in the expression of the exceptionally rich forms of culture. All right. Oh my gosh, I got another one. I got to appeal again. Woohoo, let's appeal. All right, before we move on, does anybody have any questions before we move on?
No.
All right. Okay. No questions yet, Joe?
Questions?
Huh?
Not at all. No, thank you.
Okay. 6A3, Culture, National and Revolutionary. Find the place of Mao's quote. Chapter 4 is about national culture, especially regarding the blind alleys, African, and they use the N-word for black, culture, and a need to emphasize national culture and national consciousness as the people make the shape of the struggle against colonialism along revolutionary and non-bourgeoisie or fascist lines. Chapter 4A. It's about the relations between the nation and culture. It complements Chapter 4, but emphasizes the dependence of culture upon the, here we go. We must rid ourselves of the habit, now that we are in the thick of the fight, of minimizing the actions of our fathers, or of feigning incomprehension when considering their silence and passivity. They fought as well as they could with the arms that they possessed then, and if the echoes of their struggle have not resounded in the international arena, we must realize that the reason for this silence lies less in the lack of heroism than in the fundamentally different international situation of our time. It needed more than one native to say, we've had enough, more than one peasant crushed, more than one demonstration put down before we could today hold our own, certain in our own victory. As for us, who have decided to break the back of colonialism, our historical mission is to sanction all revolts, all desperate actions, all those abortive attempts drawn to in rivers of blood. In this chapter, we shall analyze the problems which it felt to be fundamental of the legitimacy of the claims of a nation. It must be recognized that the political party which mobilizes the people hardly touch on this problem of legitimacy. The political parties start with living realities, and it is the name of this reality, in the name of this stark facts which weigh down the present and the future of men and women, that they fix their line of action. The political parties may well speak in moving terms of the nation, but what it is concerned with is that the people who are listening, understanding the need to take part in the fight, if quite simply they wish to continue to exist. Does the first paragraph seem a bit out of place to you? Does it seem out of place in relation to the second paragraph or to the theme of the entire chapter? Okay, now read the first paragraph again. What's the paragraph saying? What's its relation to the second paragraph? Or put it another way, what's its relation to the chapter as a whole? What's its relation to the book as a whole? Well, maybe it is a bit unfair of me to ask these questions, especially if you haven't read the entire chapter, or if you failed for some strange reason to grasp the relations between negritude and Afrocentricity, at least in its most rightward expression. Am I moving too fast? I had originally intended to begin reflection on chapter 4 and 4a by starting with some. Now I have to do a puzzle. Come on. I have the hardest time sometimes with these things. There we go. I did it. I had originally intended to begin reflection on chapter 4 and 4a by starting with some comment on paragraph 4.4. The first paragraph has always seemed to me to be out of place. Even Fanon seems at first glance to actually begin addressing the theme of the chapters with the second paragraph and not the first, for wanting to say what he did. Is that reason worth the comment here? However, I think that he may have placed the first paragraph there as his way of letting everyone know that although he would come down heavily upon the heads of the poets of negritude, a circle that he had once been identified with, he was not minimizing their progressive action. The fact is, though, that I don't think that many folks have placed in the first paragraph within the proper context. The first line of the paragraph is probably the most often quoted line in the book, yet few of those who use it bother to quote the remaining lines, the lines that actually express the thought that I think Fanon intended to convey. Let us check it out. Let's check it out again. But this time, pay more attention to everything other than the first sentence. I think that Fanon wanted to tell us not to minimize the progressive action contribution of those that push the negative aspects of negritude. And it's particularly good advice for us, since we're now faced with the task of analyzing and critiquing the contemporary forms of negritude, like concepts and movements within our own environment. So we should let our words and actions in this regard be influenced by the guidance provided by Fanon and Mao. This historical necessity is which the men of African culture find themselves to racialize their claims and to speak more of African culture than the national culture will attend to lead them up a blind alley. Chapters 4 and 4a may or may not read rather straightforwardly, depending on how clear your head is upon the kinds of connections you can make between there and here, between the past and the present. Moreover, it depends upon whether or not you can find and explore the nuances and subtleties or the swervies that fill Fanon's discussion of culture and his story of negritude, which these days we may tend to identify as Afrocentricity, especially its richness, tendencies, and sometimes going under the labels of cultural studies and of inwardhood as a type of relationship. Let me look ahead real quick. Oh my gosh, we're coming to an end. Yep. Oh, there's someone in the things. I don't know who it is yet. Nuance is important. Yes, yes, yes. You're correct. The above passages of 4.8 captures the message of chapter 4. Fanon encourages a national culture as opposed to both a racialized or continual African culture. Continental, thank you, African cultures. And we need to ask why. We need to interrogate the matter as they say these days. In chapter 4a, Fanon suggests that the national culture can truly exist and develop only if the people are free, only if the nation is liberated and taking the socialist road. As I read these chapters, I find it necessary to also raise and reflect upon the following questions, among others, of course, and always looking for connections between our past and present, as well as try to more fully grasp Fanon's thought. What is culture? What is national culture? Why does Fanon take the stand opposed to black culture and black republics, especially in 4.44 and notes in Senghor? What's the relations between culture and history? Now, I don't think that the answer to some or all of these questions are or will become as easy as it may at first appear. Going to a dictionary or some other reference source may help a wee bit, but it won't suffice. I mean, there's a reason that we have to ask these questions anew. We need a new take. We need some reorientation. We may, in many cases, depending on Webster, ETL, et al., is part of our problem, i.e., that's why we're stuck and confused. Fanon opens directly on the theme after the preface by saying that the chapter examines the fundamental problem of the legitimacy of the claim of a nation. Now, what exactly does he mean? Don't take it for granted that the nation exists, because the problem is that the national reality has been for the people called into question. Fanon means here that the people must be made aware of the nation's existence. He means that we need to point out the boundaries of the nation's culture, that we must trace the development in the nation's history, a history and a culture that exists prior to any contact with the colonized forces. We previously discussed the line which holds that no nation exists in Africa or elsewhere prior to those nations formed in Europe. When they were formed depends upon who you read. Some say as early as the 16th century, while most say the 18th century. This line is a variation of or runs parallel to the line holding that non-European colonized people had no history prior to their being colonized and brought into history. The fact is, however, that if peoples have a culture that's distinct from that of the colonizer, then they also have a history that developed independently of colonial intervention. If they have a culture and a history, then they have a nationality, a national reality. And I must have missed the other little star thing, but we're going to read it. It must be recognized that the political party which mobilizes these people hardly touches on this problem of legitimacy. The political parties start from living reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of the stark facts which weigh down the present and the future of men and women, that they fix their lines of action. These political parties may well speak in moving terms of the nation, but what is what it is concerned with is that the people who are listening understand the need to take part in the fight if, quite simply, they wish to continue to exist. Today, we know that the first phrase of the national struggle, colonialism, tries to disarm national demands by putting forward economic doctrines. As soon as the first demands are set out, colonialism pretends to consider them, recognizing the obstinate, I can't say that word,
I don't know that word either. Doodly?
the obstinationists.
I don't know.
All right, let me go look it up real quick. Huh? What? You gonna say something?
Let's go look it up.
All right. Waiting for my pad to think. Come on. Hello.
Drink.
There it is. Got it. OSTENT. Yes, you're going to hear me say it. Come on. Yay. Oh, I got to do another appeal. There you go.
Ostentatious.
Ostentatious, which means people or things that boastfully display wealth, knowledge, or power to attract attention and admiration or envy.
Ostentatious.
Ostentatious, humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment, which necessitates a great economic and social effort. And it so happens that certain spectacular measures, centuries of work for the unemployed which are opened here and there, for example, delay the crystallization of national consciousness for a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism sees that it is not within its power to put into practice a project of economic and social reforms which will satisfy the aspirations of the colonized people. Even where food supplies are concerned, colonialism gives proof of its inherent incapability. So, we're back to the purpose of this chapter, i.e. analyzing why and how the legitimacy of the nation must be established. In the first place, at 4.5, Fanon tells us that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism tries to disarm national demands and to delay crystallization of the national consciousness. Keep in mind, national means the whole people, one out of many. Other identities, i.e., lineage, language, or dialect, geographical, religious, etc., are to be superseded by the new unity, i.e., the national identity. The nation now stands opposed to the enemy as embodied by colonialism and capitalism, bourgeoisie culture, and by the philosophy and values that uphold them. The new unity is embodied by the people's shared interest in building a humanistic socialist society. Colonialism efforts is disarmed and delayed. The development of the new national consciousness can be traced to its point of intervention. Perhaps we have not sufficiently demonstrated that colonialism is not simply content to impose its rule upon the present and the future of a dominated country. Colonialism is not satisfied merely with holding a people in its grip and emptying its brain of all forms of content. It turns to the past of the oppressed peoples and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. This work is devaluing pre-colonial history, taking on the dialectical significance today. Now, let us be clear on this point. The devaluing of the people's history is the devaluing of the nation's reality. You may need to repeat this to yourself several times in several different ways because the import can easily escape you. We so often talk about the distortion of our history or the omission of the story presented in the schools that we and our children attend, etc. Do you now fully realize what's happening when this process unfolds? Do you have a better sense of now and why it's hard to generate decisions of the past and present national reality? It may help you a bit if you jump right now and read the first 2 paragraphs of chapter 4.a. Colonialism, because it is total and tends to oversimplify, very soon manages to disrupt a spectacular fashion in cultural life of a conquered people. This culture obliteration is made possible by the negation of national reality, by new legal relations introduced by the occupying power, by the banishment of the natives and their customs to outlying districts, by colonial society, by expropriation, and by the systematic enslavement of men and women. 3 years ago, at our first Congress, I showed that in the colonial situation, dynamism is replaced fairly quickly by the substantification of its attitudes of the colonial power. The area of the culture is then marked off by the fences and signposts. These are, in fact, so many defense mechanisms of the most elementary type, comparable for more than one good reason to the simply instinct for preservation. The interest of this period of us is that the oppressor does not manage to convince himself of the objective non-existence of the oppressed nation and its culture. Every effort is made to bring the colonized person to admit the inferiority of his culture, which has been transformed into an instinctive patterns of behavior, to recognize the unreality of his nation, and in the last extreme, the confused and imperfect character of his own biological structure. Now, above, we've seen Fanon talk about colonialism, devaluation of the people's history, and this is within the context of what the people need to do to recover their values, to overcome the self-doubt that hinders forward motion. Below, he again links his history to culture. When we consider the effort made to carry out our culture, our estrangement, so characteristic by the colonial epoch, we realize that nothing has been left to chance, and that the total result looked for by colonial domination was indeed to convince the people that colonialism came to lighten their darkness. The effort consciously sought by colonialism was to drive into the people the idea that if the settlers were to leave, they would at once fall back into barbarism, degradation, and bestiality. Ugh. Thus, the claim to a national culture in the past does not only rehabilitate the nation and serve as a justification for the hope of the future of national culture, but it also serves to help change the self-image of the people and to inspire that people to struggle to liberate the nation and to take the lead and shape its socialist future. Moreover, the efforts of the intellectuals in this regard are a necessity in any coherent program. Getting there. Okay, we got one. Oh my gosh, we're going to probably end today. Okay. Moreover, the efforts of the intellectuals in this regard. Okay, I got it. I can't help but make an aside, though it's not really an aside. To me, there's a similarity between the parallels between the line that Fanon says is used by the foreigner to frighten the people into submission to colonialism by claiming they'll all fall back into a alleged barbarism. In the line that they use on us today, when we righteously shout the need to abandon capitalism and to struggle for and to build socialism, what do they use to frighten us with? They say we all starve under socialist system, then we won't have bourgeois democracy under socialism. Then all the time the people are starving under capitalism. We lack adequate food for both body and spirit. We lack genuine people's democracy at this very moment. Lack it to the extent that people don't even know that, oh my gosh, people don't know that there are forms of democracy other than the superior to the bourgeois democracy that tramples us. So where were we? Yeah, it is necessary for the intellectual, the cultured individual to point out the legitimacy of the reality of the nation, the nation's culture, and the nation's history, especially with to the pre-colonial development. However, this action clearly doesn't prevent these or some of these individuals from entering the blind alley that Fanon spoke to us about. As we open these reflections, how does that happen? Practice without theory is blind. Well, Fanon begins to explain it to us by showing where the culture, individuals, intellectuals make their appearance, mark out the special battlefield, whereupon they make, quote, the demand for a national culture and an affirmation of the existence of such a culture, while the politicians, the reverence inside the nation, a list, parties take their standpoints, living realities, and their desire that the people take part in the fight. The cultured individuals take their stand in the field of history. It may be of interest to note that the distinction drawn by Fanon between the politicians and the cultural individuals is a likely basis for the drawing of distinctions between Rev-Nats and the Cultural-Nats, nationalists. The Nats mean nationalists. Among Bloods here and in 1960s and 1970s, at that time, we made a rather superficial distinction, if only because standing in living reality can represent a reactionary bourgeoisie worldview, and those working in the field of history or culture can represent a revolutionary interest of the people. Note that Fanon says that colonialism reacts only slightly to the aggressive response of the colonized intellectuals, in part because the ideas developed by them are also widely professed by specialists in the mother country, who on their part have rehabilitated the African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilization. Knowledge pre-colonial greatness has little immediate relevance to the present oppression of the masses, and the search for pre-colonial culture is undertaken by the intellectuals because of their anxieties of Western cultures. The truth is, however, national reality and national consciousness of the people. Check it out. The first paragraph of the chapter. Go ahead, check it out. I'll read it after this. Each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. In underdeveloped countries, the preceding generations have both resisted the work of erosion carried on by colonialism and also helped on maturing on the struggles of today. We must rid ourselves of the habit, now that we are in the thick of the fight, of minimizing the action of our fathers, or the feeding comprehension when considering their silence and passivity. They fought as well as they could with the arms that they possessed then, and if the echoes of their struggles have not resounded in the international arena, we must realize that the reason is for this silence lies less in the lack of heroism than in the fundamentally different international situation of our time. It needed more than one native to say, "We've had enough," more than one peasant rising, crushing, more than one demonstration put down before we could today hold our own, certain in our victory. For us, as for us, who have decided to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to sanction all revolts, all desperate actions, all those abortive attempts drawn in rivers of blood. Editor notes. All right, and that is the end. That is the end. That is the end of the book. And tomorrow we'll start Dying Colonialism by Fanon. Dying Colonialism next by Fanon. And that is in the library underneath Fanon. Dying Colonialism.
Nice.
All right,
Nice.
hold on a second.
Oh.
That's real quick. Okay, cool. Go ahead. Thoughts, questions, conversation.
Yeah. People really need to quit reducing structures down to a singular thing. Otherwise, they aren't going to realize the full extent or the whole placement of not placement, the whole field of the power structure. It's not going to lead them towards what the power structure is actually doing. It's going to lead them towards a functioning inside of the power structure that just leads to more of the same.
Real quick before we go to antiquity, let's see if Joe has anything to say, and then antiquity. Joe, do you have anything?
No, I'm busy coughing. I can't stop coughing.
Okay. Antiquity? What would you like to say? What would you like to add? Any questions?
I had a thought, but it's left my head.
It's okay. But I also want to mention how in colonialism, they strip those people that they colonize. The colonizer strips the colonized from their culture and their history, and they also give them this falseness that, like, if the colonizer wasn't there, then they would go back to basically out of history. And what they also said is that the colonialism brought them into history as if like they never had the history of their own. And colonialism destroys history and culture of the people they colonize. So that was one of the major things that I also saw, because when you understand the culture and your history, then you know that you are a people that is like worth, you're not in this position of slaves. And that's when you start to realize that no, this is wrong and we must fight. Go ahead.
Did Julie want to say something? I noticed they.
I was just going to say, yeah, like colonial exceptionalism and the way that they replace history with nostalgia.
Yeah. Go ahead, antiquity.
I mean, yeah, for like where I come from, they erased my people's history, or at least tried to. Not fully, tried to. Specifically the British. They came, unalived us, and attempted to put like, we're just educating you, we're making you better, we're making you perfect. And it's just really wrong.
Yeah. They do that whole "we are civilizing you"
Yeah,
bullshit.
civilizing you.
Yeah. Because you were deemed and found uncivilized, so we are here to bring your salvation to you. That's why I really think that the reason why the Christian, like white Christian church or the Christian doctrine, really like gives the justification of enslavement. I swear to God, they put that up on purpose like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like down where I'm from, in Zimbabwe, they like refused my grandmother medication and treatment because she was considered to be too uncivilized for that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on your fact that like Fanon's from Martinique but joined the Algerian Revolution in the FLN?
Yeah.
What is your thoughts? What is your thoughts so far on what you heard and how he engages with the reality of African nations? What's your thoughts all around? Like your all-around impression of him so far?
I think he offers a very unique perspective, and I think he does point out a lot of the like misinterpretations about things. I still need to hear more from Fanon personally to like,
Yeah.
because I only kind of caught on to like the last end of this book here. So, but I do like what he's saying about
Yeah.
colonization, and I do know that he brings up Rhodesia.
A lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if you don't, I'm assuming you do, but
Mhm.
Zimbabwe just used to be Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Antiquity, are you on our server?
I am.
Okay, good. We're putting the book in the announcements channel. I think Linda already took care of that. So
Yeah.
you can get the next book. We're going to be starting the next book tomorrow.
Yeah.
On, yeah, that'd
Dying
be that. So,
colonialism.
dying colonialism, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Tomorrow, 6:30
Yeah.
Central.
Okay, awesome.
And
No,
that's
it
going to
just
be privy. It's going to be privy to the Algerian times when they were seeking independence.
mhm.
So it's very good. It's very good. It's
Yeah,
one of my
no,
favorites of Fanon's.
because my grandfather, he was part of the freedom movement down in Rhodesia when we were fighting against Ian Smith's government.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
You have a
and
lot of
then my
attachments.
yeah, I have like very deep attachment to like
That's good.
all of this, and like I guess I'm just talking about myself now, if that's okay.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead. You
Um,
can take up space. Don't worry.
no, like my grandmother, she was 16 when the like fight for independence started. She ended up losing her arm in the middle because of the white colonizer. But so like all of this is like hits very close to like my heart.
Yeah, yeah. And also it talks on my position as a settler. It shows me what I must do as a settler in order to engage in revolutionary movements. Right. My
Yep.
job is as a settler is to take on other settlers in the white aristocracy, and at the same time, just supporting the revolutionary purposes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you'll see that even like you'll see a brief time within that book, Dying Colonialism, a person like so. What it is this, right? Here it is, all right. In Algeria, right? There's the people that actually came from France, right? And they took
Yes.
up land, they expropriated land, right? They did all that, right? Then you have when like those people stayed in Algeria and gave birth to other settlers, right? That were born in Algeria, had nothing to do with France, right? Barely
Yeah.
anything to do with France. Those settlers seem to be able to be on the side of the FLN. The FLN did take those settlers and they held them at arm's length, right? Because you never know when settlers will, attach themselves and vacillate or capitulate, right?
Exactly.
So, like, yeah, but they did consider them because some settlers took in FLN people and engaged with protecting them and letting stuff move on and then moving out. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
that's a potentiality for settlers here in the United States too. You know?
Yeah, there definitely is, and then like obviously in some instances, settlers are just going to stay as settlers and
Mhm.
only support white nationalism and all
Yeah,
that. But there's definitely a movement. It's not
yeah,
what's the word for it? Sorry. It's fluid in its nature, in a sense, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. So like that's what we'll that's that I don't know. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but I plan on like it's that whole suicide, like the class suicide, the intellectual
Hmm.
suicide, to be able to get away from the bourgeoisie attachment. Settlerism has a bourgeoisie attachment because it gives us privileges in this society. It gives us superiority, fake superiority in this society, you know? So that's something that we have to we have to portray whiteness. You know, we have to
Yeah.
do that suicide of whiteness because whiteness
Yeah.
is the antagonistic towards blackness, right? It's intertwined within the economic system, right? You can see that through the material conditions of like black people, indigenous people, and the proletarian status, right? The white person chose before any of those. You know what I mean? So
Yes, I
we
do.
have to, as white people, we have to portray whiteness, and we have to be race traders
Yeah. Don't
adamantly like that.
don't be a good white, be a race trader.
Yeah. Don't be. Yeah.
But
Exactly.
yeah, I just want to say that all forms of thinking that someone is superior aren't true. Like, superiority is just a myth
Mm-hmm.
that is told by those who don't want to deal with with their insecurities.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's all superiority is. It's just a myth.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. All right. Does anybody else have anything to say? Anybody else? Any questions? Any stories? Anything you would like to add? Thank you for being participating. I appreciate it. Okay. I don't see anybody raising their hands or coming up with any more to talk about. Anybody in the comments? I know there's not a lot of people in the comments, but anybody in the comments have any questions at all? Okay. Like I said, I'll say it again. The more people that participate, the more that we can draw in more conclusions, and the more that we can draw out and understand better. So the more times that we have more people participating, the better, always. So I appreciate everybody here that participated, and I hope everybody enjoys their evening. And maybe I'll see you around. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if Chicken Strips and Two Spirit are going to go live later. I don't know yet. I don't know, but I might go around the panels and stuff. So I don't know. But anyways, I wish you all good night and thank you for participating. Start the new one tomorrow. It should be a short one.